Thank you all for being here. We're getting on in the afternoon, but it's wonderful to see everyone here. Our next speaker is Jody Summers, who I have to, on a side note, say she's been an amazing volunteer for this conference for my help. I invited her to speak and asked her. She came to me and was just like, "I really would love to give this talk," and I think it's an important one because many of us follow a Western A price or paleo diet, nutrient-dense diet, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you are absorbing all of that. And so if we're eating this amazing food, if we're not absorbing it, it doesn't really help us that much. And so that was the talk she came to me with, and I said, absolutely, I want to learn more. She has a mainstream and holistic approach to healing with a bachelor degree in dietetics and food science, a master's in healthcare, and she's also a certified nutritional therapist or a therapy practitioner. And so she really looks at the whole person. And as I said, to me, many of us are following these amazing diets, but if we're not absorbing anything, then what are we doing, kind of thing. So thank you, Jody, for coming, and look forward to hearing. Oh, and she told me I need to tell you she is the grandmother of a 9-month-old, and so
there we go.
Need to tell you that. So thank you, Jody.
Thank you, Christina. So yeah, I didn't know that when I wrote that was going to be the introduction, because I certainly would have put in that I was a grandma, a new grandma of a baby girl, because that's pretty big in my life these days. But how many of you have heard the term or the phrase, "you are what you eat"? Yeah. Okay. Has anybody not heard that? I don't think so. So before I'm going to tell you what I think of that term, which can be true, it cannot be true. But I do want to tell you a little bit about myself, not just my education and that I'm a grandma, which is very exciting, but kind of how I do look at people. And so with a mainstream education, that's my education, and that's wonderful, but I'm also a nutritional therapy practitioner, which is my passion. And so I tell people I help bridge the gap between mainstream medical and a holistic approach. And so you'll see some of the things are kind of sciencey, some of the things are kind of holistic-y, and it's just the way that I kind of, holistic-y is not really a word, is it? It's just a way that I look at things. I kind of look at things from both perspectives and then look for real life results. So I do see a lot of people in my practice who, I find this conference fascinating because the vast majority of us, I'm sure there's a few, but are here because we are working toward, we have very, very big awareness of health and being as healthy and as proactive about those things as we can. The vast majority of people are not here at this conference. I don't know if you noticed that. The vast majority of people who are not here are not in the same mindset as we are. And so many people are eating the SAD diet, standard American diet. And I kind of flipped that as I have my clients come in, I'd say maybe about 50-50. But I think in general, it's like 80% of Americans are eating the SAD. And I'm just guessing. This is just a random guess, but like 80%. And maybe 20% of us are eating a more nutrient-dense diet, specifically on purpose. But I really think that needs to be flipped. Wouldn't it be fabulous if 80% of the American population was eating a nutrient-dense diet and, we'll still work on this 20%? So I decided I'd give it a new name. Instead of SAD, we're going to focus on the DAS, the dense and satisfying diet. I have no idea. There we go. But even if we're eating the DAS diet, the nutrient-dense diet, sometimes, how many of you, that's what you focus on, but do you ever still have digestive issues, absorption issues? And so that's what we're going to talk about today. I'm assuming, since we're here, and the topic is common mistakes health-conscious people make eating a nutrient-dense diet, that's what it is. But so the three, how when you're a speaker, you're supposed to have three points. So we're going to talk about food, digestion, and supplementation, how those three things can either hinder or help digestion and absorption. Okay, first we're going to go with food. Just in case we had the other the other people who are not here because they already know what the nutrient-dense diet is, I thought I would give a really quick overview. And what I often do with my clients is I kind of go through what a nutrient-dense diet might look like. Close to its original state, which we've heard a lot of this weekend. Locally grown has more nutrients in it because it doesn't travel and lose its nutrients. Organic, obviously, we've talked a lot about that. Ethically raised animals, the better treatment they get, the less stress they have, the better food they have, the better product they're going to produce, whether that's eggs or meat or whatever in that animal. A high nutrient ratio compared to calories. Now, what we didn't hear a lot about this weekend is calories, because in a real nutrient-dense diet, it's not something that you need to focus on. You don't need to count the calories, but you do need to count the nutrients. And if you look at nutrient-dense foods, you can have low-calorie nutrient-dense foods like broccoli and spinach and all of that, but you can also have, on the flip side, high-caloric nutrient-dense foods like butter and, all of those, eggs that might be high in fat but they're both nutrient-dense. So the ratio of nutrient density to calories is, again, one of those things that you want to look at. Oh my gosh, I love this one. Not fortified. So, you see boxes and stuff, and it says, and again, this is where I go back to my traditional mainstream education, and we had learned, we need to fortify with this. I remember sitting in class going, fortify with this and making notes. And I will tell you, now granted, I'm giving my age, but, back in the 100 years ago when I was in school, one of our big textbooks in my upper division classes was sponsored by the dairy industry. That tells you, and I don't think that's allowed anymore, but even as a 20-year-old, I was thinking, sponsored by, and of course, as I was thinking about it, if it's sponsored by the dairy industry, why didn't we get it for free? Because, I had to buy my own textbooks. Because, of course, they only sponsored it so they can put what they wanted in it, but we still needed to buy the book. So we learned about fortification and how important it was. Well, to get fortified food means you had to take the original food, strip out the nutrients that actually came in it, process it to make it pretty, and then put back in synthetic vitamins, and then only these certain ones. So anything that says fortified, and we're going to talk about fortification, vitamin D in a little bit, is, again, generally doesn't fall into the category of nutrient dense. And then one good rule and hopefully I can give you some tips, one good rule that I like to give my clients is that I do this 80-20 a lot. 80% of their foods should be one ingredient. Now, I'm not saying that you can't combine a lot of one ingredient things. If you have a salad and you have broccoli, rice, and mushrooms, and red onions, and you have sunflower seeds, and all, one ingredient foods to make a beautiful presentation, that's still a one ingredient food combined with other one ingredient foods. But if you pick up a pre-made lasagna from Costco, and there's a list of things, that is no longer a one ingredient food, which was obvious, and you guys would all know that. All right, so some things that can hinder nutrient absorption from food. We don't really need to go into this because we've talked a lot about this weekend, but glyphosate and Roundup, glyphosate is the active ingredient in Roundup, and obviously really bad for so many things, specifically our digestion and our absorption. It's also really bad for mental health and the gut microbiome. So you want to stay, again, going back to organic foods. Low-fat diets. So how many of you, oh my gosh, we all went through the 70s and the 80s, and the big thing, everything has to be low-fat. And so, when you strip the fat out of food, it tastes bad because healthy fats actually taste good. So now you're left with something that tastes bad, so the industry adds sugar to it, and so now people are getting low-fat but high-sugar processed foods. And actually, I believe, this is just my own personal, this is not a study or anything. I believe actually the low-fat diet and the whole cholesterol, just this focus on cholesterol and low-fat, no-fat skim is probably one of the most dangerous, big trends that we've ever had in this country as far as our health as a society. Because as we've gotten to the low-fat and higher sugar, higher carbs, we've seen all sorts of things, type 2 diabetes, all sorts of things skyrocket because of the amount of sugar that had to go into those foods because the fat was taken out. The low-fat diet also inhibits fat-soluble vitamins from absorbing. So A, D, E, and K are all of our fat-soluble vitamins. I can so get off on tangents, but I should tell you this. Okay, so I have a lot of clients who come in who have cancer, and I have yet to have one single solitary person. I always ask to have their vitamin D test. I've had yet to have one single person who has been diagnosed with cancer who has an optimal vitamin D level of 60 to 80. There's not been one person. I haven't had one. So the vitamin D is a fat-soluble vitamin. It's technically not even a vitamin, it's a hormone. But for the sake of this talk, we're going to say it's a vitamin. And you need fat to absorb that vitamin D. Vitamin A, D, E, and K are all fat-soluble vitamins. As we've taken the fat out of our low-fat diets, then we have, vitamin D deficiencies, vitamin K helps strong bones, all of those things. So again, I think a lot of you guys are probably not on the low-fat diet, but it's really, as we see people in our families eating that, you might want to say, you need that fat to absorb those fat-soluble vitamins. Okay, vegetable oils, trans fats, and hydrogenated oils, I kind of grouped them together. They actually can inhibit absorption of nutrients by the way that their things break down in your gut. They actually cause a lot of inflammation. They cause oxidation, which again can lead to cancers and all of those types of things with inflammation within the gut. So any oil, again, this is a tip that I give to my clients, any oil in a plastic bottle. So if you go to the store and it's on a plastic bottle, it's just oxidized, usually trans fats. You want to stay away from all that. Any food with any of those in there as well. Fake sugars, which would be any sugar substitute, really damages the microbiome, which then does lead to absorption issues. Gluten. I didn't attend any breakouts specifically about gluten, but it's a huge issue. We're going to look at a picture of microvilli, and gluten can actually damage the microvilli even for people who are not celiac. So people with gluten sensitivities, and generally it's full of Roundup, but gluten can actually damage the villi, which is where 80% of our absorption happens, in that small intestine. And people who have IBD, IBS, Crohn's disease, colitis, all of those gut issues will usually have damaged villi, and oftentimes from gluten and from trans fats as well. Alcohol can, the whole wine thing that I learned this weekend was devastating, but okay. The alcohol can actually inhibit nutrient absorption. Coffee, tea, fiber-rich foods can actually bind to some minerals. So you want to, now, I'm not saying don't eat fiber-rich foods. I'm just saying, if you're having, let's say you're taking a mineral supplementation, you may want to take it separate from a fiber-rich salad. Or something with phytates specifically. Medications are huge for a lot of people. Again, when I have people come, I ask them to list out the medications that they're taking, if they're on any, and then I run it through a little program that shows what kind of nutritional deficiencies that medication can cause. So we all know, well, might not all know, but statin drugs that can cause CoQ10, there's a lot of them. And people are on a lot of pharmaceutical medications. And so that's a really important thing to keep in mind. And produce that is harvested too early for ripening also inhibits that absorption because there's not really the nutrients there to begin with, so you can't absorb something that's not there. Okay, so those are all things that can inhibit from a food standpoint nutrients. So anyway, we'll just go on. So how to avoid the problems. This is really simple, just an overview. Eat organic, non-GMO, full fat, whole foods. So one of the things that I learned from my wonderful nutritional therapy teacher was, did you know that, because when people would say, oh, I eat the egg whites, because you have a lot of clients come and they're really excited because they've only had egg whites, they're eating, low fat. And so a nice way to say that is, were you aware that there is an enzyme in the egg yolk that helps you absorb the protein from the egg white? Did you guys know that? I was like, so we're all writing down in my class, and so I looked it up, and sure enough, there's an enzyme in the egg yolk that helps you absorb some of the protein from the egg white. And that's why it needs to be eaten together and not stripped from and separated. So avoid sugar, avoid hydrogenated oils, sugar substitutes, gluten, carbonated beverages with a meal. If you guys write something down on your sheet or if something to really remember, even if it's, now I'm not even talking just soda because it's carbonated, but even if it's a wonderful bubbly water, a Dasani, which I'm sure you saw me drinking earlier, which probably wasn't the best choice, but okay, whatever. Bubbly water actually can change the pH of your stomach. And we're going to talk about digestion and how it's supposed to work and the different pHs along the way. But when you drink carbonated beverages, it actually can make it a higher pH, and the higher the pH, the less the food breaks apart and you can pull out those nutrients. So it's not that I'm saying you can't drink bubbly water, but don't drink it when you're eating food because it changes that pH. And then buy locally grown. All right. Any questions, or you know what, I'll save the questions till the end. So let's talk about, now we're going to talk about digestion and how it should work. So digestion is a north to south process. It actually, we think of digestion that it starts in the mouth or it even starts in the stomach or whatever. It actually starts in the brain. As high as you can go, that's where digestion starts. I want you to stop just for a second and think about, you're going into your grandmother's house or your mom's or mother-in-law, whatever. You're going into someone's home and it just smells of a lovely dinner, and you open the door and you can hear there's something about hearing the silverware clinking, and putting plates on the table, and you're hungry, and that whole process is absolutely nothing to do with your stomach. You haven't I'm not an English major. You haven't put food in your mouth yet at all, and yet your digestive enzymes are already starting to be produced because of what you're thinking, what you're seeing, what you're smelling in the brain is sending those enzymes. Then it goes into the mouth, the esophagus, the stomach, the small intestines, the large intestines, and then you poop it out. Okay, this is super, super, super important because let's say you do go to a naturopathic doctor or nutritional therapy practitioner, I'll have somebody come to me. If there's a digestive issue, you look upward rather than downward. So even though somebody's having, let's say, chronic constipation, it may not be because it may be something that's happening in the brain. You're eating on the run. And again, we'll get to that. So digestion, all diseases begin in the gut. And the older I get and the more I attend events like this and the more I learn, I can't even, if it's not all, it's certainly really, really close to all. I mean, our good mental health, all of it, unless you're in an accident or something. All right, and then I thought I'd do my next one with a quote that I made myself. The brain, I mean, even our brain has to do with the gut. And so diseases may begin in the gut, but digestion starts in the brain. So there you go. So when I talked about eating and how we think, the autonomic nervous system has a lot to do with how we digest and how we absorb. And that is the fight or flight or rest and digest. So when you're being chased or if you're stressed, obviously we all know about the fight or flight. We can also call this rest and digest, also rest and restore, and rest and repair. So resting provides your body the opportunity to do things that you cannot do. And here's the thing. You cannot be in both places at one time. You're either in the parasympathetic, the stress, your body's producing these stress hormones, or you're over here where your body is not producing these stress hormones. You can't be doing both. Now, you can switch back and forth because you can, come out of your yoga class and get in an argument with somebody in the parking lot. So yes, you can switch back and forth pretty quickly, but you can't do both at the same time. So this is really, really, really important. And again, if it's one of those things that I think if you just leave here with a couple things and you stop eating in your car while you're driving, you will have better digestion and absorption of your nutrients. And here is why. When we're in the car, our body knows that we need to be focused on not hitting the person in front of us, not having somebody hit us from the back. We're looking around. And even though you may be, you might be comfortable where you're driving, your body is still in the stress. You're aware of what's going on. You cannot be driving defensively and digesting your food at the same time. So by not eating in the car, when you eat in the car, your body doesn't digest your food completely, or as well as it should. I should say maybe that way. So if you look at this over here, and in the middle, let's see. Oh, there we go. So if you have a high fight or flight, your blood pressure changes your blood pressure, changes your blood sugar. You have a lot of adrenaline. Your heart rate goes up. Your breathing rate goes up. All of those things. It also changes your digestive system and your immune response when you're in the fight or flight. So if you are resting and relaxing, these things are improved. So when people eat in their car and you're not digesting that food. So again, we're talking about a nutrient-dense diet. Even if you're eating top of the line, whatever it is, if you don't have the right stomach acid because you're stressed, you're not going to absorb those nutrients as you should. All right. So we talk about stomach acid. Super, 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 super important. So now we went from the brain about thinking, chewing our food, and in our stomach, to break down our food correctly and all the way, the stomach acid, when it's working right, should be a pH of between 1.5 and 3.0. That is so acidic that if you took a drop and I placed it, you were able to take a dropper of stomach acid out from a drop and you put it on the carpet, it would burn a hole all the way down into the subfloor. It's strong. It's supposed to be strong. And so when it breaks up the food like that, it's supposed to be strong to break up the food almost to a liquid so it can go into the small intestines to be absorbed, the large intestine to break apart the fiber and things, and then again you poop it out. When your stomach acid changes its pH to much higher than that, you don't break down that food correctly. Now, should I talk about? Yeah, so I'll just talk about now. I think there's a slide, but I'll just talk about. So some of the things that actually can change our stomach acid are like Tums and antacids, baking soda. Some people do baking soda to because they have indigestion or acid reflux or whatever it is. PPI drugs change that stomach acid to a higher. The what?
I think Tums is all calcium.
But it does, yes, and it just adjusts that so much so you don't feel Okay, let me even back up. So some people will go to the doctor, they'll say, I have a lot of indigestion. I have a lot of acid reflux. And the doctor will say, oh, okay, that's fine. Here, let me get you a PPI drug. Let me get you whatever it is, a purple pill or whatever it is. Now, have you ever gone to a doctor and you said, I'm really stressed and I think I might have high blood pressure? Well, what does he do? Or she do, or whatever. Well, but they check your blood pressure, right? Okay. You go in and you say, now I can't think of something else that you test, but generally a doctor will test to make sure what they're giving as a prescription is actually going to help the problem. They want to make sure that you have the problem before you give the prescription. Oftentimes, do you know anybody who's been able to walk into a doctor and said, I have acid reflux or I have indigestion or whatever it is, and got a prescription for a PPI drug, which is an acid reducer, without ever being tested to see if they made too much stomach acid? It happens all the time. Okay? How do you know you have too much stomach acid? Because you wouldn't know because you were never tested for it. So if your stomach acid is not 1.5 to 3.0, it doesn't break down the food all the way, your body is so innately smart that it holds that food there until it's broken down so it doesn't go through the small intestine and damage the villi. So it'll sit there longer than it should. Therefore, when it's sitting in there longer than it should, it putrefies, it rancidifies, it ferments, and it comes back up, and it is acid reflux. Now, I'm not saying that people don't have acid reflux because that's really what's happening, and it can actually damage the esophagus. It shouldn't be there. But the vast majority of people who have that problem, it's because the food's not breaking down all the way because there's not enough strong stomach acid to break the food down. So what's the answer? Go out and get something that makes the stomach acid less strong. Now, what that does is it coats this, and you feel better, but the root problem was never even looked at to make sure that that was the root problem. In general, I had one client one time who had an stomach acid test, and she came back negative. I mean, he thought she made too much stomach acid. I suggested she request it. She requested it. She had it done, and sure enough, she didn't make enough stomach acid. It's the only client I've ever had that's ever been tested for too much stomach acid.
How do you test you for that?
I don't know. That's not a very good answer. I think she actually had to go, like it was a procedure, I think.
It's a capsule, but they swallow it down and then bring it back up.
Okay, because she was there like a long time. Yeah. Okay. But again, I'm not making, please don't misunderstand. I'm not giving like any medical advice like stop taking whatever it is. But you want to make sure that if you're taking a pill for something that you have, to make sure you actually have the problem before you take the pill for that problem.
Also, too, when you're eating, should you not drink stuff? Because that would...
And that's what specifically, you can drink a little bit of water, that kind of stuff, but like a bubbly water. So the question was, should you not drink while you're eating? Not a lot, because again, you want that strong stomach acid. You don't want it, fill it up with, and dilute that stomach acid, but never a carbonated beverage with a meal, because it really does change the pH. Okay, so now, if it works right, your food's all broken up into liquid and it goes through the small intestine, where this is little villi, whatever these are, and then there's little tiny villi on there. And that is, so your stomach is all squirrely like that, and these are the little fingers that come out and grasp the nutrients from the liquid in the food. That is what brings, this is it. This is where we absorb our nutrition. The vast majority of, a little bit is done in the large intestine, but not much. The small intestine is so important because we can be eating the highest quality food, taking the best quality supplements, and if it's not getting and absorbing into the small intestine, you might as well eat Taco Bell across the street. I mean, because it doesn't really, well, that's not really true. I don't want you to do that. Forget I said that. because there's bad things in there where there's not bad things in nutrient-dense food. Okay. But this is really important. If you ever had somebody or seen somebody with severe Crohn's disease or colitis where a lot of that is damaged, you're going to find that they lose weight really quickly. The reason they lose weight really quickly is they're not bringing the nutrients into their body to actually build up and repair things. So you can have somebody who's perfectly fine, 1 month, and then 3 or 4 months later lose a ton of weight because and usually their bowels are very different than than it should be because it's just moving right through the small intestine. All right, the last place that you'll have absorption, or at least some absorption, but I did want to mention this because, again, it's a really important part, is the large intestine. This is where the things are separated from the fiber, but it's also where the fiber gives fibers and different probiotics are in the large intestine. This is where, again, 70 to 80% of our immune system cells reside in the large intestine. So go back to that quote that wasn't from me about all disease begins in the gut. So if you have an immune system, like cancer is a failure of the immune system to either identify or kill cancer cells, and if 70 to 85% of your immune system cells reside in the large intestine, what part of the body is really important for cancer protection? Your large, the microbiome in your large intestine. The other percentage of the immune system cells are in the Peyer's patches, the bone marrow, and a couple of other places around your body. But again, you remember, if there's an immune system thing going on, always treat the gut, because that's where those cells are located. All right, this one, I almost left it out because I wasn't sure how to talk about it. But yeah, you need to go to the bathroom every single day. That's just the way it is. It's like taking out the trash, and it gets nasty, and some people come to me and they'll have a bowel movement every 3 days. And then they'll say, I've been like that all my life. My doctor says it's normal. Well, it may be common, but it's not normal. Or is it healthy? Really, if you look at babies, they eat, they poop. They eat, they poop. They eat, they poop. Now, I'm not saying that every time we need to eat, we need to be using the restroom, but it should be once a day. It's really important for your general health. Maybe not so much absorption or what we're talking about, but. All right, so how do we actually improve some of those issues that we talked about? Slow down your eating. Your grandma was right. Sit down, enjoy your meal. And, if you'll notice when I was talking to somebody, I have a little booth out here, and her daughter is in college, and we were talking, I forget now, I don't even see if you're in here. Her daughter was in college, and she's having some gut issues, and it's because in college you're so stressed all the time, and you're eating on the run, and you're eating standing up, and you're eating in the car, and you're eating between classes, and, if just all she could do was sit down when she ate, it would help her digestion, like all of us. Do not eat in the car. How many of you are not going to eat? And remember that. If you say, put a little sticker, Jody says, don't eat in the car. Chew completely, eat mindfully, and eat relaxed. So now, how do we improve in our stomach? Acid reducers, Tums, baking soda, PPI drugs. And there's a time and a place. Let's say you had you went to somebody's house and you overate, and you're starting to feel really bad, and you need to go to bed. It is not going to kill us to have some kind of a little bit of baking soda in it. Once in a great while, if you've overdone it, that's a little different than having Tums or a PPI drug or an acid reducer every day or at every meal. It's very, very different. No carbonated beverages with a meal. Oh, you guys are going to love this one. So add in a digestive enzyme. If see whoever you work with, your naturopath, and ask about adding in a digestive enzyme. I'm 54 years old, and I travel a lot. And I take digestive enzymes when I'm stressed, when I travel, and I'm over 50, so that pretty much means I take them every day. Here's one of the reasons why you might want to consider taking a digestive enzyme or taking something that helps strengthen that stomach acid. And I have for you at my booth, this is called fire cider. And then I have the recipe too, so you can get a free download with the recipe. I tell you how to make it. Basically, it's apple cider vinegar with the mother, ginger, turmeric, onion, garlic, and then a bunch of other things. And you cut it and put it at in your thing, which I should have brought one that was made. I totally forgot. So, you've got all the things. And then you put the apple cider vinegar and you let it sit for about a month. And then you strain it out. And this is really it's powerful. It's very potent. It's when you say the word fire cider, that's a good description of what that is. But it's very acidic. And so it can actually spur on your own stomach acid. It's a good, safe way, like if you don't want to do a digestive enzyme. How much time do I have left? Oh, okay. Then I can give this story. You're going to, again, I think for anybody who has parents who are older, this is really interesting. So one of the things that strong stomach acid does, remember, strong stomach acid is low on the pH scale, 1.5 to 3.0, is that it kills bacteria and viruses because it's strong, it's an acid. Well, when you're traveling or you're eating something that has a bacteria on it, let's say you went to a restaurant and they weren't so clean and they made a salad and it was not a real clean salad, the stronger your stomach acid, the more likely that bacteria is going to be killed in your stomach so it doesn't make its way through the small intestine, large intestine, and then you get sick. So if you look I live in Auburn, California, which is between Sacramento and Lake Tahoe. And there is a little town, not a little town, but there's a town called Citrus Heights, about 20 minutes from me. And about 6 to 8 years ago, you might have heard it was on the national news. It was very, very sad. There was an elder care home, and I don't know how many residents were there. Do you guys remember this story at all? It just was heartbreaking. And there was some kind of gastrointestinal something that was on the food. Like clearly there was something wrong with the food supply chain there. And like the vast majority of the residents it was bad. I think 8 people died, 1/3 of them were in the hospital, and like 2/3 of them were sick. Now there were also staff that lived there, and they were all younger. None of the staff who ate the same food, they had some issues. None of them got sick that they had to go to the hospital, and none of them certainly passed away. And this is one reason why it could have been. I didn't work there. I don't know the exact reasons, but when you look at the situations like this, when you get elderly people, if you're over 50, just like our skin, the collagen in our skin, we lose that. We lose our, some minerals, and we lose a little bit of our height and all that. We lose the strong stomach acid. Well, strong stomach acid kills bacteria, and if these people who are now older in their 70s and 80s and 90s have really weak stomach acid and they're on PPI drugs, the chance of them eating something and getting an upset stomach is far greater than somebody with strong stomach acid. So it's really important when you travel to possibly take digestive enzymes with you that will help boost that. So does that make sense? Did I explain that well enough? All right. How do we improve the absorption in the small intestine? Villi is, and you saw that little purple design or whatever, villi is super important. That's where you pull in those nutrients. Reduce inflammation in that gut area by not eating vegetable oils, hydrogenated oils, gluten, glyphosate, processed food, refined foods, and sugar substitutes. Same thing we talked about before. Okay, how do you increase absorption of nutrients in the large intestine? Remove antibiotics. So again, remember that the vast majority of, all of our gut microbiome is in the large intestine. So antibiotics kill bacteria, and the good bacteria in our gut gets killed along with the bad bacteria. So as we're increasing the amount of antibiotics in our food chain and giving antibiotics to little children all the time really easily, it actually can damage this healthy gut bacteria. And that is why it's so important. And you'll see, there's different people here are talking about the healthy commensal gut bacteria. Really super important for our immune system, for digestion and absorption. So remove antibiotics, and remember that glyphosate and Roundup is a type of an antibiotic, and it kills bacteria on plants, which is similar to the bacteria that's in our gut. Glyphosate, vegetable oils, refined sugar, trans fat, same thing. It's like the same thing over and over, and I was typing this up. But add in lots of fiber from vegetables, because that's what the healthy gut bacteria actually eat. A prebiotic is food for probiotics. So if you're taking eating lots of probiotic-rich foods, taking a probiotic supplement, make sure you have sufficient hydration and sufficient fiber for that. All right. Lastly, we talked about food, about just digestion. We're going to talk about supplementation because it's really, really popular in our society. There is no pharmaceutical drug that can make up for a nutritional deficiency. That is super, super important. There is no pharmaceutical drug. You can also say there is no supplement supplements are to supplement a nutrient-dense diet. They are not to be the end-all, be-all of, and then eat junk food, okay? There is no supplement that can replace a properly prepared nutrient-dense whole food diet. So there's no pharmaceutical drug and there's no supplement. That doesn't mean that supplementation is all bad, because our soils are so deficient in minerals that they're just, if you look at some of the studies, after I sent this to, for this presentation, I should have just slipped in a study. Just recently, they did a, I even forget where I saw it. I want to say it was USA Today or something, and it was on like PubMed, where they evaluated the soils. Anybody see that recently, like the last 2 weeks? Anyway, how deficient our soils have become, which we've known that, but now it's starting to really be documented. The top nutrient deficiencies in our society is water and hydration, vitamin D, and magnesium. Okay, so fractionated nutrients and supplementation. What fractionated means is high doses of one single nutrient. So let's go back to my breast cancer clients, and they come to me and their vitamin D is at 22, which is very common in the 20s. Their doctor, who they had that taken from, let's say they just got it from the doctor that I go to, what they consider normal range is 20 to 80. Okay? So if it's at 22, there's not going to be a red flag for their doctor to say, or at least my doctor, if it's at 22, I'm not going to get a red flag that says your vitamin D's really low, or it's certainly way on the low end of what we consider normal. So in that case, we may work to get it up to 60 to 80, which is optimal, and then give an individual vitamin D supplementation until it gets to the optimal level, and then not supplement anymore. What I find a lot of times is that people are taking really high doses of a specific one nutrient without knowing whether they're deficient, or even knowing how long you're going to do that. And that can actually throw off other nutrients and the absorption of those. So again, if you're supplementing with a higher dose of just one, it's called, we just call it fractionated nutrition, which is just one, and that can actually throw off balance the others. Okay, well, I guess now we'll talk about vitamin D. I thought there was another slide in there. But again, talking about vitamin D, One of the reasons that we are so deficient in vitamin D as a whole in society is we have been how we eat has changed. My mother was raised, and my dad too, was raised on a farm in Minnesota, and they raised their animals, and you ate the entire thing. You know, you ate what you grew, you ate what you raised and you killed, and you ate it all. You didn't just eat the white chicken breast from Costco, in the bag, and then throw away everything else. The nutrient density is in the organ meats, it's in the bones, it's in the, not that the other parts aren't good too, or it's in the high nutrient dense vegetables. Another, and that's where a lot of the fat soluble vitamin D is also in those parts. Another reason we're vitamin D deficient is that we have been put the fear of sun, like how did generations live before sunscreen? How did they survive? Like, it just is amazing to me that, we've been taught that sun is so bad. You should only go out in the sun for 15 minutes a day and then make sure that every bit of your skin is covered with sunscreen and even your chapstick. Like, how did thousands and thousands of years go by and all those people survive if the sun was so bad? And as we've seen more and more sunscreen, we've seen more and more skin cancer. So because people are vitamin D deficient, and vitamin D deficiency is associated with cancer. Another reason we're vitamin D deficient is the introduction of hydrogenated and partially hydrogenated oils. All right, so supplements for digestion and absorption. Eat a real food diet. Possibly consider doing digestive enzymes to the what?
What are digestive enzymes?
Digestive enzymes are something that can actually...
I know what you use it for, but what do you have? Which enzymes are they?
It just, everybody's different. The question was, what enzymes? I use a straight betaine, but there's like 4 or 5 of them, and you really need to find, everybody's bio-individual, you really need to find what works for you. And there is actually a test that sometimes I do with my clients. They'll come over for a consultation. They'll bring a lunch with them, and we do a digestive enzyme lunch where they'll take a bite of food, take a digestive enzyme. I'll set my timer for 7 minutes. We'll continue our consultation. And at the end of 7 minutes, if they feel a warming sensation, that's a pretty good sign that they're digesting their food. Sometimes, in fact, how much longer do I have? Okay, so I'll talk really fast. This is so interesting. Amy was in, oh no, you weren't in my class, that's right. Okay. When I took the nutritional therapy class, and I will answer your question, I promise you.
Because there's in pineapple are enzymes.
Yeah. Yep.
There is in...
And everybody's different, so it just depends on what works for you. But let me give you a really good, you guys are going to love this. So I was in the nutritional therapy class. There were about 30, I think there was 28 of us. There were 28 people. One time we did this digestive lunch. And first when we got there, everybody went around and said things about themselves. 2 of the girls had autoimmune disease going into this 1-year program. And then we did this digestive lunch, and we found out that about 1/3 of people had pretty good stomach acid. I was in that first third. I had pretty strong stomach acid. About 1/3 of the people had so-so. Their digestion wasn't great. About 1/3 of the people had really poor digestion, and they could even take digestive enzymes and weren't even feeling this warming sensation that you can get when you take digestive enzymes. The 2 girls that had the autoimmune diseases both fell into the last group, where they never even felt their digestion working. Because it's a 1-year program. And so at the end, that was the first part. At the very end, one of the things that happened is one of the girls who, in fact, you might know her. Do you guys ever, Beth Manos from Tasty Yummies? Anybody follow the Tasty Yummies blog? Or no? Okay, it's worth it. Jot it down. It's not on my slide. Tasty Yummies, gluten-free blog. She's fabulous. She was in my class. She had and this is all documented. I'm not telling you anything that isn't on her website. She had this autoimmune disease, and at the end of the 1 year, when she actually got her digestion to work, It was the first time that she was without autoimmune symptoms. And it's because she got her digestion to work, because she had been eating a whole food diet ever since, and she has no longer any autoimmune issues. All right, self-care is not selfish care. Making sure you know this, do this, sit down, take care of yourself is not selfish. And as a mama of 3 children and 1 beautiful grandbaby, I still make sure I go to yoga every day. I take a hot bath almost every night, because what I do for me, I can help other people. If you supplement, there are 90 essential nutrients. That means essential. Your body cannot make them. Our body makes cholesterol. You don't need to supplement with cholesterol, but there are 90 essentials, 60 minerals, 16 vitamins, 12 amino acids, and it says 2 essential fatty acids. Technically, there's 3 because the 2 combine to make a third. Those are, if they're not in the soil, they're not in our diets. And when I supplement in a full spectrum supplementation where I'm making sure I'm getting a good base of this, of nutrients. When you do supplement, make sure instead of just taking vitamins, that you're also getting a good balance of minerals. Minerals make enzymes that are the precursors to the absorption of vitamins. Okay, let me say that again. Minerals come from the soil. If they're not in the soil, they're not in our food, because they're not in the things that are grown, they're not in the animals. The animals eat the stuff that's in there. If not in the soil, they're not in our food. Minerals produce enzymes that are the precursors to the absorption of vitamins. So just taking vitamins without the right precursors, really, again, talk about absorption, really isn't all that great. Okay? So we addressed the 3 areas that can increase or decrease food digestion supplementation. We could go on forever, but we won't. And there is my information if you are interested. I have at my booth a download for that fire cider recipe that I can give you. Along with that download is also a checklist on good digestion that I don't even have. You can just come and get it. Yeah, and I have the full spectrum supplementation, and I have individual consultations, and I think that's it. And did I do within my 5 minutes? I have 5 minutes. Do we have any questions?
I have a question.
Yes.
So you talked about sugar substitutes. What about stevia?
I didn't catch the first.
You talked about sugar substitutes. How they're bad. What about stevia?
Okay, so the question was sugar substitutes, and when I specifically, that was about the kind of the chemical ones, and the question is, what about stevia? So stevia is from a plant, which is better than some of the others. However, generally, it's still a highly processed food. I mean, it's not the plant. You're not eating the one ingredient. Now it's processed through a thing. All that said, if you're going to do some of the sugar substitutes, it's the best of the, a drop of stevia in a big glass of, green tea is better than some of the other options. But again, remember, it's still processed because you're not growing it on your own thing, taking it from and eating it. So it's still processed food, but it's better than some of the other alternatives. All right, yes. So the question was, I mentioned avoiding vegetable oils, so I'm really talking specifically hydrogenated and partially hydrogenated. Any of the soybean, corn, canola is one of the worst, and it's marketed as good, and it's really not. But olive oil, a fresh pressed olive oil that you know is fresh pressed, that's not shipped from another country on a ship for too long sitting in the sun, it can be very beneficial. But yes, like saturated, I have a presentation, I talk about different fats, and you can see the stability of fats. The saturated fat is all, it's just much more stable, so butter and... Right, so the question was about safflower oil and sunflower oil. Again, if it's a processed hydrogenated oil, it's off the table if it's a cold press. But then when you get into it, then there's the heat point. And that could be a whole nother conversation. But anyway, so that's it as a summary. If you want that, if you want the recipe for the fire cider, if you want that download, if you want any information, I thank you for coming because I didn't know if there'd be anybody here.